Kent, we're doing a ball python care guide today, but I'm going to try to make it shorter than the one that we did a few years ago, but packed with more information if we can. That's the goal.
Okay, well, I have an idea. Do a care guide for a frog instead.
I mean, I think people are going to be watching this video because they decided on a ball python.
Well, a frog won't size you up and it won't kill you with its poison.
None of those are a thing with ball pythons.
Okay, well, tell me this then. Which has killed more people in the world? Frogs or ball pythons?
Frogs.
Okay, but...
Kent, I feel like we're already wasting time.
Well, I'm not rolling yet.
No, I think you are.
Oh, shoot.
Welcome to the Green Room. I'm Bob Bledsoe. You know, it's been a few years since I did a ball python care guide, and shockingly, I find that there are still arguments on the internet about how to properly provide for these snakes' basic needs. And really, that's only because there are a bunch of different ways that you can go about doing it, and a lot of people tend to think that their way is the only way. So I'm going to say this right now. My way is not the only way to do it. I'm going to show you what I do here in the Green Room, and I'll cover some valid alternatives as well. This is Delilah, by the way. She's lovely. Anyway, I'm not going to be just throwing a bunch of rules at you in this video because I think it's important that you understand the snake and understand why we have certain rules or certain things that we need to provide. That will probably help you understand why we have so many different ways of doing things, and hopefully you'll be able to understand what things are appropriate for the animal and what things are maybe not appropriate for the animal. For example, ball pythons are meat eaters. So most keepers feed their snakes rats. Many people feed their snakes mice. Those are both appropriate and valid choices. But someone trying to feed them hamburger would not be appropriate. So, and real quick, just to explain that, it's because we want to feed them whole prey items, you know, that have the bone and the guts and everything for the proper nutrients. Plus, your ball python is not going to eat a hamburger. But anyway, we're not on feeding yet. It's important to remember that most reptiles are actually very simple to keep. The reason it seems confusing or daunting at first, other than because of the arguments that you see online, is because, you know, this might be your first snake, and a snake is very different to care for than a dog or a cat, which is what most of us grow up with, right? But once you understand what their basic needs are and how to provide those, it's actually very simple. And it's also transferable from animal to animal when we're talking about reptiles. So once you learn how to provide heat for a ball python, you can then provide heat for a black-headed python. You would just turn the heat up a little bit, or provide heat for a reticulated python. You would just turn the heat down a little bit. That's right, we keep our reticulated pythons too hot. It should be a little bit cooler than a ball python. Anyway, this isn't about retics. However, I will say that both my retics are out right now and they want to come out. So at some point in this video, maybe soon, I might let the retics out, which means reticulated python shenanigans potentially behind me. It's still a ball python video though, even if there's silly snakes causing trouble behind me. So Delilah is an adult ball python, and chances are that when you get a ball python, it'll be something that maybe looks like this, or maybe looks like this, but about this size if you get a baby. But, you know, regardless of the size of the snake that you get, the basic needs for a ball python's survival are a comfortable cage with plenty of security, heat and humidity, food and water. So let's talk about the cage first. When I say a comfortable cage with plenty of security, I mean security from your perspective and from the snakes. So you definitely want to have a cage with locking doors, and you don't want them to be able to crawl out of the screen top.
I prefer a titanium cage wrapped in chains and guarded by a wizard's enchantment.
Well, Kent, you don't have a snake, so...
Thank God.
So these little snakes need to be in a cage that they can't get out of, but they also need to feel like they can hide from predators. That's their security. If they don't feel secure and feel like they're hiding and nobody can see them, they're probably not going to eat for you. So let's talk about how to provide them with that.
Hi folks, Future Bob here, back with another fancy hat from the future. I'll be popping in occasionally to correct past Bob's incomplete information, laziness, what have you. Anyway, I know this one isn't a big deal, but there are some of you old school viewers who can't get your mind off the fact that technically Kent has two snakes, and he does. He's got Eric the Murderer, who lives in a closet, and then technically Anya is Kent's snake as well, but obviously Kent has never been within arm's reach of Anya. So I would say neither one of these counts, right?
I'm letting the retics out. So basically, there are 3 different types of cages that are mainly used by pet keepers. Fish tanks, front opening glass cages, and PVC cages. Now, people also use tubs as well, especially for young baby snakes. They look like this. You know, something similar to this. And so we'll talk about that too. I'm not going to talk about racks because those are usually used by breeders who have lots of animals. And this video is for people who are keeping ball pythons in a pet situation. There goes Stella off on her adventure. All right. The first type of cage is one that I can't show you because I don't have any, and that's a fish tank. The reason I don't have any is they are my least favorite cage to keep a ball python in, although it can be done. They're my least favorite because glass doesn't retain heat very well, and the screen top doesn't retain humidity very well, and it oftentimes doesn't retain your snake. Also, when you have to get in there to work in the cage or grab your snake or anything, you're always having to come in from the top, which is very scary for ball pythons, especially for baby ones, because it seems like a predator, like a hawk swooping down on them. It's a very common situation, though, for someone to have a ball python in a fish tank with a bunch of books piled up on top of that screen top so the snake can't get out. And they're always very surprised to learn that a snake can definitely push a stack of books or plated weights or something to squeeze out of that. You know, oftentimes when someone says that their snake has gone missing, it's gone missing from a fish tank. So, like I said, fish tanks can work, but there are modifications that have to be done. The advantage to them is that they are one of the cheapest enclosures you can get. You can often find them for free. And like I said, they can work. So if you have your ball python in a fish tank and it's working for you, that's fantastic. Hi, I'm over here now. I do have one front opening cage that I got for my little house snake, Harry, and the advantage over a fish tank is that I can go in from the front, for one thing. It makes it much easier. But also, because this cage was built specifically for reptiles, it has a nice locking top up here. Plus, I think these look a lot better than fish tanks. But the disadvantage is that they're more expensive. They're harder to find for free. I do have to turn up my heat a little bit because the glass is not good at retaining heat, and I had to use tape to cover the screen top so that the cage retains humidity. But I just wanted a little bioactive cage that I could see on 3 sides for my little house snake, and this works well for him.
Stella, I don't think I need you on the air conditioning unit. You know, do you think you could go do something else?
By far my best... Echo, can you go somewhere else? We don't need you checking me out right now. This video is not even about you, okay? All right. By far, my favorite type of enclosure for a snake is a PVC enclosure. These were specifically built for snakes or for reptiles. PVC holds heat, it holds humidity. These are escape-proof as long as you secure the doors. They work great. The downside is that they are more expensive than the other cages, but I think that it's worth it to spend the extra money for a cage, especially if you're getting the cage that your snake is going to live in for the rest of for the rest of their life. They're going to be in there for maybe 30 plus years. Get them a good cage. I don't have food for you. Why are you so interested? Go up with Stella. Go do something else. These cages that I use, by the way, are black box cages. They're fantastic. I have a discount code for you. Discount code I think is just GRP, but we'll talk about them later. Quit being so crazy. All right? Go do something else. Yeah, go up. Go see Stella. There's also tubs like this that you can get at a hardware store. These are very cheap and they're good sometimes for a baby snake that's not very confident yet. They can be in a little tub and not feel like they're in a huge space that has lots of predators. The downside is that you still have to go in from the top and you can't see your snake very well, which I think for most of us that have pets, we want to be able to see our animals. The upside is that it's cheap. You can just get it at the hardware store. Also, really easy to maintain heat and humidity in a tub. By the way, there's an entire list of products that you can get in the description of this video. So they're all like Amazon affiliate links or some of my sponsor links, stuff like that. So almost everything that you would need is in the description. Many people have a different theory about cage size, so I'm going to give you a couple of appropriate parameters. A lot of people say that the length of the cage should be as long or longer than the snake, and that one's great. There's also, a lot of people say that one length plus one side of the cage should be equal or larger than the snake, and that works as well. A lot of people say that a 4x2x2 is the perfect size for an adult ball python, and that's great depending on the snake. There are some ball pythons that would love to have more room than that, and there are some adult ball pythons that may not be as confident and they might be happier in a slightly smaller environment. But either way, your snake is going to hide most of the time. Ball pythons are out during the evening and early morning, and they're hiding most of the time during the day, and they're hiding a lot of time at night as well. Ball pythons will climb on anything that you put in the cage. They do like to climb up, but they're not arboreal, meaning they're not good at just hanging on and staying up on high things. So if you build your cage, if you make your cage super tall and then give them all these heights to climb to, they're going to fall off of that and they could potentially hurt themselves. So having a 2-foot tall cage is really great, because taking a fall from 2 feet up onto soft ground, not a big deal. So if you're going to go really big with the cage, keep it 2 feet is great. Even 3 feet is okay. But you really want to expand the floor space. Once you've settled on the type of cage to use and the size that's appropriate for the animal that you're getting, you need to figure out the security for your snake. Ball pythons are preyed upon by every animal in their environment, and they come out of the egg knowing that. So their number one concern is security. That's over food, water, anything else. They're concerned about being able to hide. So you need to provide them with hides. At least 2, one on each end of your enclosure. You're going to have a warm end of your enclosure and a cool end, and those hides should be exactly the same. And the reason is that if you have 2 different hides and the snake prefers one over the other just because of the shape or whatever, they'll use that because that's their favorite bit of security. They'll use that over thermoregulation. So even if they need to warm up, they won't leave that cool hide, or vice versa. So your hide could be square like this. It could be this size or bigger or smaller, or it could be round like this. Same thing, bigger, smaller, whatever. But it depends on the size of your snake as far as how big to go with this. This is a hide for a subadult. This would be for a large juvenile. So you want your snake to be able to tightly fit into their hide. They want to feel all sides of the hide on them. If I put one of those baby snakes that I had in one of these hides, that's not secure for them. So you want to go with something smaller for a baby snake. And use a real hide, a real snake hide, where they have a small entryway and then the rest of it is closed off. This box. Small entryway right here. Everything else is closed off. A lot of people use a half log as a hide. Watch this. Here's Echo's half log. It's not her hide. It's just enrichment in her cage. But imagine being a tiny animal and trying to hide in this. You're way exposed on this end and you're way exposed on this end. And people go, oh, my half log, I put it up against the back of the cage, so it's only open on one side. It's still an entire side that's open. They're not hiding. So get them an actual snake hide where they can crawl in there and feel like nobody can see them. By the way, you don't have to spend a lot of money. This is a food container from the dollar store. You can get a whole stack of these from the dollar store and then just cut a little hole in it, and this works great. This is for a larger young ball python. I have ones half this size for hatchling ball pythons.
Also, those hides behind Past Bob are black box hides. They are made out of PVC. They're really sturdy. They come smaller than this and bigger than this, and you've got the option of having a top entrance or the front entrance like normal. They're great hides.
I'm just wrangling the retics right now. So once you have the hides figured out, you need more security in that cage, and you can do that by adding clutter. That could be nice looking pieces of wood and plants, whether they're fake plants or real plants, to make it look really nice, or it could be cardboard boxes and balled up pieces of paper. The snake doesn't care. So the looks of the cage is all up to you. But especially for a young ball python or any ball python that's not super confident yet, having their cage filled with stuff so that if they crawl from, what are you doing, Stella? Oh, you're just wrecking things? Hang on, I gotta quit doing that. Don't be a problem. I'm putting you back up too. Okay. You're going back up top as well, young lady. What was I even saying? What was I saying? Oh, we were talking about clutter. So the snakes don't care about what clutter you have. They just want to be able to go from one hide to another where they feel like they're kind of hidden as they crawl out of a hide and into another. They'll go under that paper or under the log, whatever, just plenty of security. Oftentimes, the reason that a snake doesn't eat the first time when you get them, you try to feed them a few times and they just refuse, is that they don't feel secure enough. It's very vulnerable for a snake to be eating. It takes a while and they're super vulnerable. They're not going to do it if they don't feel safe. You need to always have a bowl of water in your snake's cage and change it regularly. You can change it every day if you want. I change my snake's water twice a week. I find that if I change it once a week, I notice some of my snakes will go directly to their water and start drinking, which means I've waited too long. So for me, every 4 days or so is when I change it. You're going to see a lot of people on the internet tell you to provide your snake with a water bowl that's big enough for them to soak in. I don't do that. And the reason I don't do it is that as clean as I try to keep my cages, I know they're going to bring in particles of fecal matter and urine into their drinking water, and I don't want them to do that. Ball pythons don't need to soak. They're not swimmers. They're not, in the wild, you don't see them jumping into rivers and swimming around. Even though they are able to swim, they can do it. They don't particularly like to. And you two are about to go back to your cages. So I find that as long as I keep their humidity up, they don't need to soak. And they're totally happy with water dishes that are clean and not big enough for them to soak in. I know a lot of people do the great big water dishes. That's okay. It's just my preference that they're not drinking water that has fecal matter and urine in it. Look at those two. I've got the plants affixed with museum putty so they can't pull the plants off, but let's get back to the ball python video, yes? We don't need to spend a lot of time on water. You understand how to provide an animal with water, right? By the way, this is Bear. He's a delightful young man. Let's talk about substrate for your cages. There's all kinds of different substrates. My favorite is cocoa husk because it holds water. I can mix water into the cocoa husk. It holds it like a sponge and it keeps my enclosures humid. Stuff like, look at this. Aspen shavings is common to see at pet stores. I don't recommend it. Hold on, let's see if I can do this without making a huge mess. That's what aspen shavings looks like. I don't recommend it for ball pythons. If you live in, I live in Southern California in a fairly dry area, and in my area, I don't recommend it for ball pythons. I recommend it if you live in a tropical area, or use it for a desert species like a black-headed python. That's who's on that aspen in there. But again, there's all kinds of stuff that works for ball pythons as far as bedding goes, and you can just test out different things and see what you like. I don't recommend just going to the hardware store and getting something that is not specifically designed for snakes, because you could end up getting something like cedar chips or pine shavings, both of which are toxic to snakes. So you could just not knowingly get something that is not good for your animal. So get something that's specifically made for snakes and give it a try. See what you think. A lot of people mix cocoa husk with other types of bedding, and that works as well. I'm not going to go over every type of bedding that's out there, but just get something that's for snakes and see what you think. My recommendation is cocoa husk. Oh, also bioactive. That's a whole other video, bioactive, but bioactive substrate is great for ball pythons. I guess I should mention cleaning really quick. Make sure your cages are clean. I spot clean every day, so I just open the cage and I'm looking for poop or urates. A urate is white and it comes out when the snake pees. It looks like bird poop, but it's not. It's calcified urine. So I spot clean every day, and then you want to do a full substrate change and clean everything out, once a month. If you're great at spot cleaning, do it every 6 weeks, something like that. If you're not good at spot cleaning, you'll probably find that you'll need to clean, do a full clean out more than once a month. But keep your cages clean, keep the bacteria out of there. That way, if you have spikes or dips in humidity, that's not going to kick your bacteria up and make your snake sick. Keep those cages clean. This is Lydia Dietz that I have right now. In case you're keeping track, Echo and Stella were causing too many shenanigans, so I put them in the other room. They're on the snake wall, hanging out. They'll be happy for the duration of the video. Lydia's going to hang out with me for a minute, and then I'm going to let her free roam because she wanted out. So that's where we're at. Let's talk about humidity. The humidity level that you want to be shooting for in your cage should be between 60 and 80%. That will give your snakes the best chance of shedding all in one piece, which is ideal. You can achieve this humidity by, number one, covering any screen top that you might have. Use foil tape that you can get at the hardware store. Just cover that screen top, just every part of the screen top that doesn't have a heat element on it. You don't have to cover where the heat element is, but everywhere else, get that covered. And then mix water into your substrate. I don't mean spray with a spray bottle, because when you do that, you're just putting a light layer of water all around the cage, and then it evaporates immediately and it goes back to low humidity. Mix that water into your substrate. That's why I like cocoa husk. Now, you can measure your humidity using a digital thermometer hygrometer, like this one. Digital, not the analog with the dial. And don't put your hygrometer halfway up the cage like this, because the snake doesn't live there. The snake lives on the ground. There's the inspector, by the way, poking his head out. Oh, I don't know if you can see that or not, but he's seeing what's happening here. Just put your hygrometer on the ground. That's where the snake is. You're going to have less humidity the further up the cage you go, so keep it low so that you can measure exactly where your snake sits. And by the way, that humidity range is pretty big, right? Between 60 and 80%. And really, if your humidity drops down to 50, it's not the end of the world. That's not a problem. If you see that it's at 50, just bump it up a little bit. If it's up at 90, especially if you've just changed all the substrate and now you have higher humidity and it's like 90, not that big of a deal. It'll drop down.
Just don't allow condensation on the sides of your cage. That's too much humidity.
Humidity is an area where you can have a wide range, but it's very common that people just forget about humidity and they let the cages dry out, and that's when your snake has a bad shed. So just make sure that your humidity somewhere in there between 60 and 80% is ideal. All right, we got the detective inspector coming out. I'm gonna put Lydia Dietz down on the ground so that she can move a little bit. So let's talk about temperatures and safe ways that you can provide heat for your snakes. Snakes are cold-blooded, meaning they have to find a temperature that's right for them to make their body a comfortable temperature. So if they want to be warmer, they have to go to a spot that's warmer. And if they want to cool off, which they often do want to cool off, I say that because many people think that snakes always just want heat. If they want to cool off, they need to have that side of the cage too. So you're going to have a warm side of your cage and a cool side of your cage. The snake will decide where they want to sit. You don't have to worry about that. So if your snake eats food and you think he should be on his warm side digesting, it's totally okay if he chooses to go to his cool side. If he needs the warmth to digest, he'll move over there. So you don't have to worry about that. What you do have to worry about is providing them with an appropriate temperature gradient. When you look online, you're going to see a lot of people say 90 on the warm side, 80 on the cool side. Those are the general temps for ball pythons that people always give. I like to keep my snakes a little bit cooler. I find that they're more comfortable, a little cooler. So I go 88 on the warm side and about 78 on the cool side. Again, with a little bit of leeway. Okay, so your snake could potentially still digest at like 86 degrees, 85 degrees, something like that, but keep it a little warmer than that on the warm side. And then the cool side can go down to like 75. But as a benchmark, 88 on the warm side, 78 on the cool side. Anything around there is going to be just fine. Now, that thermometer hygrometer that I showed you that's now sitting back in the inspector's cage, I only use that for the hygrometer. They usually have a thermometer along with it, but that's going to tell me what the temperature is on that spot that the thermometer hygrometer is sitting. So what I want to use is a temp gun. This is essential equipment if you have any reptile, because I can take this temp gun and shoot it anywhere in this cage and see what the temperatures are at. You know, I can see what my cool side is, what my warm side is. I can shoot it onto the snake itself and see what he's preferring right now. So get a temp gun. That's linked in the description as well. There's an Amazon affiliate link to a good temp gun. They're not that expensive. There's a number of ways that you can provide heat for your snake, but there's only one way to regulate that heat, and that's with a thermostat. A thermostat, this is an inexpensive one that you can get on Amazon. There's probably a link in the description to this particular one, but there's also ones that are much better and much more expensive from Herpstat and Vivarium Electronics. Those are what I use for all my cages. This is kind of an extra one that I would use for a quarantine tub or something like that. So one way to provide your ball python with heat is with a heat mat. Now, there are better things to do with your snake that provides heat and some other spectrums, but a heat mat works well for allowing your snake to digest. But it only works on certain types of setups, and for certain types of setups, it's the best way to go. So they work with glass and plastic, not PVC cages. PVC is too thick, and most cages have too much substrate, so a heat mat is not going to heat through the substrate. So a heat mat goes on the outside of the cage underneath. So that's why I'm saying glass, a little bit of glass or a little bit of plastic in a tub, it works well for, but you can't have thick substrate over there. You can't have a bioactive, you can't have a thick amount of substrate. But basically the way this works is you've got your heat mat that's plugged in. I don't permanently tape mine. This is like 3M tape. I could peel this off and permanently stick it to the bottom of a cage, but I don't use this permanently. It's just for a temporary situation. And you take your thermostat. I'm not going to tell you everything about a thermostat. You can figure that one out, but because they all have. Buddy, go back in that hide. All right. He's back in. I'm trying to do all this complicated stuff and hold a snake at the same time. It doesn't work very well. The point is, your thermostat, they come with instructions and there's videos you can watch on how to use the thermostat, but basically a thermostat has a probe that measures how warm things are. And the way you do a probe on a heat mat is, again, this heat mat is going under the enclosure, not on the inside, but the outside, underneath the enclosure. This probe gets taped right here in between the two. So this sits on your heat mat, and that will regulate your temperatures. You're going to use your temp gun on the inside of the enclosure to see what the actual temp is, because you might set your thermostat to keep it at 90 degrees, but that actually might heat the glass up to 100 degrees. So you might have to kick it down to 85 or something to get it to where your temp gun reads 90 on the hotspot with that. Now let's talk about some potentially better ways to provide heat for your snake. By the way, you're going to see a lot of people online arguing against the use of heat mats because they're bad. They're not bad. They're fine. Just use them with a thermostat and it's going to work great. There are, like I said, better ways to heat, I think, from above, but a heat mat works fine, and the majority of ball pythons in the world use belly heat, whether it's from a heat mat or heat tape. So it's fine to do, but let's talk about these others. So you can use a radiant heat panel like I use in most of my cages. This whole thing is providing heat to Maya's cage here. Maya's right down there. You can't see her, sorry. But most of my cages have a radiant heat panel. You can use a ceramic heat element. You can use a deep heat projector. You can use a heat light. I don't like to use heat lights, and I'll explain why in a minute, but they're not bad. You can do it. Don't use a red light. People use red lights because they think the snake can't see that. Since they can't see red, they're not going to be able to see the light. They can still see the illumination, and it makes it so that that red light's on for 24 hours. Your snake never gets a day-night cycle. So you need to have the lights come off at night and then go on during the day. I use LED lights, and those are on for 12 hours and then they're off for 12 hours. And the LED light is not a heat source. We'll talk about halogen lights, though. There's some benefits to some lighted heat sources. I just don't use them myself. So the thing with the heat panel, I use those in these cages because I want that whole end of the cage to be heated nicely. If I had a CHE, a ceramic heat element, or a deep heat projector, those are gonna focus the heat right onto one basking area, and that's fine too. That works as well. It just depends on what you want. A lighted heat source, a deep heat projector provides some spectrums for the snake that's helpful. A halogen light sort of mimics the sun in some ways. It doesn't provide UV, but it provides some things that are beneficial to snakes. But again, it just makes it more complicated. You got to turn that off at night and then turn on another heat source, because you want your snake to have access to heat 24 hours. They don't need a night drop. You'll hear people talk about a night drop, which works great for some reptiles and some snakes, some species, like a night drop, but you don't need that for a ball python, because in the wild, even though when you look at the weather in West Africa, it does get a little bit cooler at night, stays warm, but gets a little bit cooler. In the burrows that those snakes are in, they're usually underground in some sort of burrow, that temperature is going to stay stable. That's what they're used to. And especially if they're digesting food, you want them to have access to that heat all the time. So don't do a night drop for ball pythons. And if you're using a light for a heat source, make sure you have something else that kicks on at night. That's all. Now, you're going to use the same type of thermostat, you know, whether it's the one that I held up there, that Inkbird one, or the Varium Electronics or whatever. They all have a probe, and that probe is what's measuring the heat. And so for a probe, the way I do it is I've got this probe that is just hanging down about halfway up the cage, and I hot glue it to the side. So what that probe does is it's going to regulate the heat, but it's not going to tell me exactly what the temperature is where the snake's sitting. And I know that's a little bit confusing, but what it's going to do is I'm going to set the thermostat for now, let's say at 90 degrees. And then I'm going to measure. So at that probe's going to stop the heat from heating more once the probe reaches 90. But at the spot where the snake sits, that might end up being 98 or something like that. So I still need to use a temp gun to measure what the temperature is where the snake sits. So my thermostat doesn't need to read the number that I'm looking for. This is what's reading the number that I'm looking for. The number I'm looking for is 88 to 90 degrees. And as long as my heat gun reads that where the snake sits, my thermostat can be sitting above 90, well below 90, whatever it needs to be sitting at to get that spot where the snake is at the right temperature. I hope that makes sense.
Real quick, past Bob should have mentioned UV. UV is something that may be beneficial to ball pythons, but there hasn't been any real studies that show that it is or not. I've used it for several of my species of snake and haven't really noticed any difference at all. Ball pythons don't bask in the sun, so if you're going to use UV, make sure it's a shade dweller. That's the sort of low wattage UV that's available out there, and it's not going to hurt your snake for sure. We just don't know how much it helps. So use it if you want to. Make sure it's shade dweller.
I have a number of videos on this channel on feeding, but we're going to go over the basics. And we're going to do that while I scroll the horde of keepers over on patreon.com/greenroompythons. These are the people that help out the channel and keep it going, and in return they get a bunch of perks. So if you're interested in joining this awesome community, give it a look. Patreon.com/greenroompythons. So there's one main rule with feeding ball pythons that you're going to hear online a lot, and that is to feed them 10% of their body weight, or a meal that's roughly the thickness of the thickest part of their body. And that's all people say about that rule. But this is very important. That rule is for baby ball pythons, and you know, as they grow. But once they get to adult size, like Freya here, if I was feeding her something the thickness of her body, that'd be like a rabbit, like a small to medium-sized rabbit. She's not eating that. She doesn't eat anything larger than a medium rat. So, and she doesn't eat very often. When she's not in breeding season, she eats every 2 to 3 weeks. And if I just had her as a pet and I wasn't breeding her at all, she'd eat probably every 3 to 4 weeks. So let's talk about how to do this for a baby, and then how to taper it down and taper it back a little bit as they grow. By the way, thanks to the Horde of Keepers for their support of the channel, and special thanks to our channel sponsors. These are people that you can get things from if you're starting out with ball pythons. You can get cages from Black Box Cages. There's your discount code. You can get those frozen rodents that I just showed from Lane Labs. That's where I get them, and there's your discount code. You can get awesome ball pythons from the Royals Project. They have a discount password. And once you have your snake, you can send a shed into RGI, Rare Genetics, and figure out what the genetics are, but you can also determine whether your snake is a male or female, which you can't do visually with ball pythons. They have to be popped or probed by someone who knows what they're doing. Don't try and do that yourself. Or the easiest way to do it is take a little piece of shed, send it into RGI. So that's that. Thanks to them for their support. Here we go. Let's get back to it. Okay, this little baby, it's about the size of maybe a snake that you might order if it's a relatively new baby that's well started. She gets fed once a week. She's going to Sam, by the way, who is one of my Patreon supporters. So she gets fed once a week, and I feed her a rat pup. She's going to take one more rat pup before she gets shipped off to Sam. And that is about, I don't know if you can tell, but that is, it's frozen right now and in a baggie so she doesn't smell it, but about the same thickness as her body, and it's about 10% of her body weight. She'll then graduate to a weaned rat when she grows a little bit. This is Han. He's a little bit older, and he took his last weaned rat last week. So here's the weaned rat. There's the thickness of his body. He's ready for smalls. So this is a small rat. It's actually a fairly small rat. It's only a little bit bigger than that weaned. There's a bit of a size range, but basically he'll take one of these, and that will be the biggest rodent Han will ever eat. Han is a male. I don't feed my males anything bigger than a small rodent every 2 weeks for their entire life. So the inspector that you saw when you saw bear, those are good sized snakes. They're not too thin. They eat once every 2 weeks, and they eat a small rat. That's it. Those small rats are much smaller than the thickest part of my adult ball python's body, and that's okay. So the babies eat every 5 to 7 days. Actually, once they've taken their first 5 meals or so, they eat every 7 days. That's it. Once they get onto weaned rats, it's 7 to 10 days. And once they get onto small rats, it's once every 2 weeks. My females can graduate to medium rats. That's then the biggest rodent that I ever feed them. And they get much thicker than the size of a medium rat, but I don't go bigger than that. So they eat it depends. I breed my females, so it's a different feeding schedule, but for a pet feeding schedule, if they're a full-grown adult, technically snakes grow their whole life, but they're big. Every 3 weeks, some people feed their snakes every 4 weeks, and that's fine too. So just find a feeding schedule that works for you, but don't do it weekly for an adult ball python. It should be every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks or longer. And don't feed them something that's as thick as their big fat bodies are. These are heavy-bodied snakes. They don't need something that thick. So did I make the point? It's important. People overfeed their snakes all the time, and it's unfortunate to see. So here we go, moving on. Again, I have other videos on my channel that cover switching a ball python from live to frozen thawed, or from rats to mice. Some snakes only eat mice, like Tiger Lily here. Some ball pythons only eat live. I don't have any, but I know that there are some that do. You can usually switch them to frozen thawed, and that is my recommendation, by the way. A lot of people, if you have a snake that won't eat frozen thawed, I understand that, but a lot of people use the argument that they feed live because they want their snake to do the natural behavior that they do in the wild. But what I want everyone to understand is ball pythons are not active hunters. They are ambush hunters. They set up an ambush, and when the rodent comes running by, whether it's actually alive or whether it's been warmed up and the snake just thinks it's alive, they're going to do the same behavior, which is strike and wrap. And then they're either actually killing a rodent or they think they're killing a rodent. And the frozen thawed rodent can't turn around and bite them back or whatever, so it's just safer. But it's the same behavior. They're going to sit in ambush and strike and wrap when the thing runs by. Are there any sitting near me? No. And as long as I don't run, I'll be okay? I mean, sure, Kent. I don't believe you. So I almost never recommend books to snake keepers on anything unless it's like a Smithsonian book that gives a little bit of information about all the snakes in the world, something like that. But there is one book about ball python care that just came out recently. It's really good. It's called A New Keeper's Guide to Ball Pythons by Tracy Judd. It covers a lot of really great information, and I recommend it. I have no affiliation to the book at all. I did put an Amazon link in my list of all the things in the description. You're going to see a huge list of stuff, but it's in there. And so, if you're into learning with books, that's the one to get. A care guide usually just covers what it takes to keep this animal alive. And this care guide was no exception. But there's a lot more to keeping an animal, a pet, that's going to live 30 plus years than just keeping it alive, right? There's enrichment, and there's handling and socialization and mutual trust. There's all kinds of stuff. I have a lot of videos on this channel that cover those things, and there's more coming out every week. So hit subscribe if you are into that kind of stuff. And I hope this video helped. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.
I only had to pop in, what, 5 or 6 times to fix things? Wow.